My name is Brian Bleeker. I operate Old Town Framing and Fine Art in Riverside County, California. For over 30 years, I have traded and collected Western art and photography. In 2009, at my gallery in Old Town Temecula, I acquired a battered and long-forgotten cabinet card photo of young Robert Leroy Parker, posing in a tent studio with his friend, Harry Alonzo Longabaugh. Then, while examining the artifact, I discovered the long scar swerving across Parker's left cheek. The photo was later authenticated by Dr. Sabrina Caldwell of the Australian National University. It is the earliest known image of the men who will become Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. In November of 2016, I notified the historical world of my discovery and its full authentication by independently publishing the Amazon Kindle ebook, Butch and Sundance, The New Evidence. However, as the Trump incursion unfolded and America's institutions began trembling beneath the designs of Putin, my announcement went largely unnoticed. While I grew our knowledge of the Wild West, many around me fell mute, or even succumbed entirely to hard-right propaganda. Competing authors Daniel Buck and Michael Bell soon attacked my book with sabotage reviews. I had assumed that intelligent Wild West historians would inquire further, but there were none. 3 months later, I released my first YouTube video under the same title, serving notice of my find to the entire world. This entertaining presentation, running almost 8 minutes, added sounds and music to the narrations of Dr. Caldwell and myself. The New Evidence video quickly gained a wide international following, drawing interest from over 100 countries. Good news, as Americans had become intellectually stiff and seemingly uninterested in their own history. With both a book and video now in the public realm, and 3 different versions of the image floating around in cyberspace, I approached the major media outlets and historical institutions. For months, I emailed publishers, educators, museums, and news sources within the US and UK, announcing the recently published artifact. Incredibly, I got back only 3 personal responses. The Telluride Historical Museum director showed brief interest, but he negotiated in bad faith. Dr. Stephen Aaron, history chairman at UCLA and president of the Western History Association, emailed me back, suggesting I contact a very unreceptive Autry Museum. Then he disappeared. Later, when I contacted the Western History Association and proposed a presentation at their November 2017 convention in San Diego, ironically themed Against the Grain, I found myself banned from all WHA gatherings and publications. The third respondent wished me luck, but politely declined. To be clear, each of these institutions, and dozens of others, were advised of the new evidence and chose to ignore it. Very disappointing, since some of these entities are unquestionably expected to demonstrate evidential curiosity. But one thing I seldom encountered during this project was historical passion. The entire field of supposed experts appeared to be unqualified. To make it easier for a publisher to introduce me and my research, I wrote a 2,000-word article on Butch Cassidy's facial blemish. Robert Parker has an elongated facial scar, easily seen across his left cheek in any copy of the 1894 Laramie Prison mugshot, which is exactly matched on my photo. Several major magazines were professionally queried about publishing this article, or a similar piece. But to my amazement, there were no responses at all. Despite considerable efforts, I could not locate even one relevant expert or institution willing to discuss the new evidence. Why was everybody running and hiding, particularly when these 2 bandits were so famous? Then I considered that no researcher before me had ever documented Cassidy's obvious scar. Nobody else could even recognize young Butch and Sundance. Since our understanding of the Wild Bunch had changed little over the previous 80 years, all interested parties apparently sat unprepared for any new Butch and Sundance evidence. Perhaps the so-called experts were primarily movie fans, posing as historians in order to be part of the action, while forever peddling their own versions of stagnant stories. In that case, they would disdain any further information. Moreover, some would likely attack me, just as competing authors Buck and Bell already had. It became clear that spotting this artifact required a special vision, courage, and understanding. I had the qualities needed to recognize Butch and Sundance before the fame and studio lighting, but I could not locate even one like associate anywhere on Earth, so I dismissed the entire field. My strange relationship with these two budding outlaws, waiting so patiently across halls of time, had made me the new authority. The future of their factual account was now firmly in my hands. And I have decided to give you, the viewer, a very special look at my research and findings. First, I want to thank San Jose State University and their School of Industrial Arts. I had a great experience there, graduating with honors from California's earliest institution of higher learning. I also want to mention my friends at Aaron Brothers and Michaels. This project developed quickly in the months after my mom, Barbara, passed away from lymphoma. I was able to pick myself up emotionally as a team member with Aaron Brothers, and even after my pop, Eugene, passed away from a stroke 2 years later, I found solace there as a designer and framer. I want to thank my associates at Aaron Brothers and our parent company, Michaels, for all their help and support. Naturally, I am forever grateful for the work undertaken by my own sister, Dr. Sabrina Caldwell of the Australian National University, which eventually concluded with an official authentication. Dr. Caldwell is an expert with both computers and photographic representation, as her many colleagues at the ANU Computer Research Center will attest. Her blog, The Photographicalist, explores photographic composition and authenticity across a diversity of subject matters. During her year-long examination, I absorbed every book or article I could find on Cassidy and the Kid. The infamous duo's later activities were relatively well documented, but there were no early accounts. I soon realized that our investigation potentially expanded what was currently known about these outlaws. And much of my research, including inquiries about the traveling photographer Oscar S. Dow, swirled around one bottleneck. Repeatedly, the historical record led me to conclude that all three men were in southwest Colorado in June of 1889, and that they convened for the photograph in question. After reviewing all aspects of the evidence, Dr. Caldwell agreed. I also need to acknowledge my resource authors, particularly Richard Patterson. His biography was the clearest collection of Cassidy knowledge that I found. I am indebted, as are we all, to Charles Kelly, the author of 1938's Wild Bunch classic, The Outlaw Trail. Certainly Donna Ernst gets strong mention for her work in understanding the Longabaugh legacy, and Tom Hatch cast The Last Outlaws in a sensible light. Finally, Karl Motz's Biographies of Western Photographers was crucial in spotting the mercurial Oscar S. Dow and his pioneering photographic family. In this video, I will utilize the research of these authors, as well as my own, to demonstrate that the extraordinary assertions I am making are entirely substantiated by historical documentation and have been painstakingly proven using repeatable techniques of modern forensic science. Here is the Dow photograph, taken in a canvas tent beside a dusty road in the Colorado Rockies. The image sheds daylight on a pivotal moment from the fading Old West. Captured in albumen are Robert Leroy Parker and Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, posing as successful mining investors. In reality, these men have little to lose, but possess the raw nerve to brazenly take what they want. On June 24, 1889, four armed horsemen robbed the San Miguel Valley Bank in broad daylight and rode off with over $20,000 in cash and gold. Numerous eyewitnesses saw the bold crime, and two of the participants, Robert Parker and Matt Warner, were positively identified by rancher Harry Adsit during their escape. Tom McCarty was later implicated, but the fourth man was never identified. This photo documents that very event and the origins of Butch and Sundance. These are the famed desperados, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid as we know them best. Shown is the Fort Worth 5 photo of 1900, taken by Texas studio photographer John Swartz. With Butch, seated on the right, and Sundance, seated on the left, are William News Carver, standing on the left, Harvey Kid Curry Logan, standing on the right, and Ben Kilpatrick, also known as the Tall Texan, seated in the middle. Many authors suggest that the idea to pose for this photo was probably Butch's or Sundance's. In light of the new evidence, taken over a decade earlier, such notions assume a proper logic, since these partners in crime already had a photographic tradition attached to their robberies. This image has a galvanizing power over the viewer. Cassidy, at the height of his era, grins into the camera. His dapper crew are tough, talented, and notorious, like himself. But beneath the combed hair and fine new suits, their noses are broken, their bodies are scarred, their limbs are tweaked. Sundance has lost an earlobe. Butch looks like an ex-prize fighter. After enough time pondering these gaudy bandits, all gussied up and at the apex of their careers, it can be hard to imagine them objectively, as young men, before all those rough and tumble years on the run. Naturally, the Fort Worth 5 image was deemed a primary image for any comparative study. The Laramie prison mugshot was also an obvious pick. The last exemplar tagged by Dr. Caldwell was the Harry and Etta portrait, taken at DeYoung's Swank, New York gallery in February of 1901, days before their departure for Argentina aboard the SS Herminius as Mr. and Mrs. Harry A. Place. While Dr. Caldwell reviewed the photographic evidence, I put together an historical perspective. Here is the Butch and Sundance timeline, as we generally know it, with the new evidence shown in relation to the three accepted exemplars. We see that the Dow image is significantly earlier than the known photos. My research puts Robert Parker at only 23 years of age here, and Harry Longabaugh is just 22 or 21 years old. But already they are plying their trade, posing as mining investors while carefully watching the bank schedules and payroll dispatches. Furthermore, because Robert and Harry appear to be close associates in this photo from 1889, one cannot help but suspect that these men had already been friends for some length of time. Many authors agree that, due to occupation and proximity, these two cowboys had numerous opportunities to meet up, beginning in 1885, when both lived and worked around southwest Colorado. Like his father Max, Robert found work hauling ore from the Telluride mines, and Harry was nearby in Cortez, helping his cousin George raise horses, which were likely sold in the mining districts. Let's analyze the new evidence. The card is a gold-stamped imperial mount, measuring roughly 7 inches by 10 inches. Affixed to the card is the 5-inch by 7-inch albumen print that has us intrigued. That leaves a 1-inch margin at top and sides and a 2-inch margin at the bottom. There, on the left, is the Dow moniker, cursively inscribed into an artist's mortarboard with 3 paintbrushes. On the right is the title, Artistic Photographer, inside a fancy ribbon design. The card is finished in two-tone beige. Damages include a stain on Subject A's ear, scratches, and a huge chunk torn from the bottom. Interestingly, somebody has long ago tried to repair the card by taping on some matching cardstock. Right away we notice peculiarities. Usually a photographer from this era included his address and/or the city he worked out of. This proprietary card is apparently not tied to a fixed location. What's more, the subjects are posing upon canvas sheets in front of a painted canvas backdrop. The whole scene is significantly overexposed by light from every direction. This is a tent studio. Oscar S. Dow, with his family based out of San Francisco, was a traveling photographer, known to have crisscrossed the West, repeatedly setting up his canvas tent studio in mining boomtowns. Karl Motz, in his biographies of Western photographers, places Oscar Dow in California, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, and lists him as traveling. I have also found a trove of online photographs placing O.S. Dow at numerous locations throughout southern Utah. Motz explains that standard cabinet cards, measuring 4.5 inches by 6.5 inches, were popular novelties for over 2 decades. But by the late 1880s, larger deluxe card varieties, like this Dow product, came into vogue. So while Motz dates most oversized cards and impressed lettering to the 1890s, many collections, including my own, include examples from 1888, 1889, with gold stamping, square corners, double tones, and straight edges. These were top-of-the-line keepsakes at that time. Just what Butch Cassidy would have bought to impress his associates and leave to posterity. There are no signs of writing or other marks on the back. So how do we know that the photo on this card is from June of 1889? Because 1889 was when cards with mortarboard and ribbon designs like this first appeared for sale around Denver. And June of that year is logistically the only time when Robert Parker, Harry Longabaugh, and Oscar Dow could have met up. All three men were conducting their businesses in southwest Colorado that fateful summer month. Before June of 1889, Longabaugh was stuck in the Sundance, Wyoming jail, then chased out of that state by a pressing arrest warrant. After that particular month, Parker was riding for his life with Warner and McCarty, then settling in Wyoming, where Longabaugh was very unlikely to go, and where Dow was never known to have set up his tent. There were no other windows of opportunity during the brief period in which this style of deluxe card was made and sold. And as a traveling photographer with limited storage space, Dow would not have been using old card stock. My own Dow photo collection indicates his designs are quite specific to the time period. Originally from Scotland, the Dow family sailed to America in the late 1600s. Many members of the Dow lineage became East Coast photographers. Louis Dow, inventor and photographer, added an E to his name and moved to San Francisco about 1872. He inspired Dow brothers Arthur, Duane, and Oscar to also move west, modify their names, and pursue photography as well. All three worked in California, but young Oscar proved to be the true wandering spirit. He updated Uncle Louis's traveling camera, built a proprietary wagon, and took his act on the road. We no doubt set up across from the post office in Silverton, Colorado, because the Silverton Standard mentions him many times, often touting his fine artistic flair and reasonable prices. Significantly, Oscar is also noted in print to always bring the very latest in folders and mounts. Dow may have shot the photo in Silverton, or perhaps took it while set up in nearby Telluride. The Telluride Miner newspaper didn't exist yet, but other publications along Dow's extended business route noted his appearances, like the Nevada State Journal and the Albuquerque Citizen. When I looked for evidence that Oscar Dow visited Colorado in 1889, I turned up something very unusual. I found a woman named Helen Ann Dow, with an E, who was born in Denver in November of 1889, but to parents with a different last name. I was even able to confirm her age from dates handwritten on the backs of her baby photos. Incredibly, gold-rimmed cabinet cards of Helen Ann Dow as an infant were available for sale on eBay, so I bought all of them. Helen's parents were Fugus and Lydia Cochran of Denver. They were apparently well off and appreciated the finer things, since Helen's baby photos are lavish, bejeweled productions. But they had no other children. There was no boy to one day inherit his father's estate. I concluded that Fugus might have been impotent, and that he and Lydia may have been impressed with the esteemed Oscar S. Dow as he came through Denver buying photographic supplies. Helen was conceived in February or March, right about the time Dow would have been a player in Denver. Interestingly, Helen Ann Dow went on to an artistic career, first as an illustrator for a Denver newspaper, then as a publication artist. Her artwork can be seen inside the Knights Templar Denver Convention booklet for 1915. Later, she became one of the first female fire watchers for the National Park Service, living alone for weeks at a time atop Devil's Rock Lookout in Pikes National Park. Based on her career, it seems likely that she knew who her biological father was. Another possibility arises. If Oscar Dow was in Denver during the spring of 1889, he may have been noticed there by Robert Parker, who I theorize was in town to rob the First National Bank. On March 30th, 1889, a well-dressed lunatic extorted $21,000 from the bank president while waving a revolver and what he claimed was a vial of nitroglycerin. If Parker was that madman, then we know exactly where he got the cash to dress so finely and collect photographic souvenirs. Fast forward a few months to June of 1889, to the mining boom towns of southwest Colorado. Wow, look at how they were. Parker is this ambitious young buck. Longabaugh is his sidekick. Both men are dangerous, calculating criminals, but they maintain a sense of dignity. Remember, these men were cowboys, promised a living through resourcefulness and hard work. But their prospects were betrayed when the cattle barons and railroad tycoons clamped down on the land. Ranch hands like them found out the hard way that you had to make a real killing to get ahead. Standing is Harry Alonzo Longabaugh. At only 22, he has the battered hands of a bronco buster. His jacket is buttoned just at the top, like a gunslinger. His mustache and hair are bushy. His nose does not yet seem broken. A long storage stain obscures his right ear, but he still appears to possess all of his right earlobe. His left hand is extended to hold the chair behind Parker. It is possible that Longabaugh's wrinkled apparel accompanied him from the Sundance jail. Robert Leroy Parker is seated and staring away from the camera toward the tent's door flap. Cassidy researchers know that he always sat facing the door when he was inside of a building. Although only 23, his hair has receded and he assumes the full posture and physique of a man. We see the big forehead, massive box jaw, and wiry mustache, all features of Butch Cassidy. But because this photo has no sheer studio lighting and Parker's face is relaxed, there is less of the characteristic details that we are used to seeing on Cassidy, like creased eyes or orbital shadowing. His clothing is another story altogether. This gray or beige suit is of high quality and complete with a matching vest and white bow tie. In fact, this suit is strikingly similar to the one worn by Cassidy in the Fort Worth 5 photo. Parker has returned to Telluride in style, impersonating a fictional mining investor. But he is actually here to steal the payroll money from those arrogant bastards at the mines, who were treating him like common labor just a couple years prior. Where did young Parker get the hard cash to impress Tom McCarty and Matt Warner and launch his bold plan in Telluride? In my opinion, Robert Parker was living high off the recent robbery of the Denver First National Bank. This possibility grew even more likely as the investigation proceeded. But my focus was on the evidence now in front of Sabrina Caldwell. The Dow tent photograph, an overexposed albumin print of two young men with smooth skin and straight noses, was to be scientifically pitted against famous photos of middle-aged outlaws posing under studio lights. After Dr. Caldwell accepted the challenge of conducting an official forensic examination, she went to work creating 6 proper facial templates. These were precisely oriented headshots from the Dow photo and the 3 exemplars. She acquired the known photos from accurate original sources, copied them exactly, then carefully scaled and rotated them to maintain proportional integrity. This process alone took a couple weeks, but yielded top-notch accuracy. These templates were then verified, labeled, and saved for use on all subsequent facial studies. Next, she painstakingly located and identified the key anthropometric points on each face. Here we see the completed layouts of recognized points for both subjects and their exemplars. Complete anatomical nomenclature for all these points are listed in the New Evidence ebook. Accurately mapping each point was a very long and tedious process for Dr. Caldwell, but these carefully plotted images would form the basis for the majority of her findings. The first comparison test undertaken by Dr. Caldwell was the facial alignment of subject A versus the Longabaugh exemplars. Such similar poses provided for ideal comparisons. These results clearly warranted further investigation, as there were no disqualifying proportions amongst an array of alignments obviously consistent with both exemplars. Harry was rather easy to spot, even as a young man and before the broken nose. Check out his familiar searching eyes, thin dark eyebrows, and those high cheekbones triangulating to his chin. You can even see a little baby fat here at age 22. Naturally, he's got more hair and a bushier mustache, but in recognizable hair patterns exhibited by the Sundance Kid in subsequent photos. Now Dr. Caldwell put her precision to use in a point-to-point comparison between the faces of subject A and the Longabaugh exemplars. The end results, published in the New Evidence, were over 350 measurements, all falling within a maximum 5% degree of error. After subject A was compared to the 2 Longabaugh exemplars, the exemplars themselves were then compared against each other, using the same points established for the subject A studies, and those comparisons also fell within the same 5% maximum deviation. There were initially a couple of anomalies exceeding that range, but those were soon explained by discernible triangulation differences. Overall, a pattern of adherence was consistent for every standard facial measurement. There were also many identifiers on Harry's right hand, which was beat up from roping horses. Here we see Harry's hand from the Dow photo and both exemplars. After examination, Dr. Caldwell concluded that the bulging vein and big diagonal scar on the right hand of subject A matched those same features on Longabaugh's right hand in the known photos. But my own inspection identified many other strong similarities. A second forefinger scar, characteristic creases atop Harry's knuckles, plus the familiar curve and length of his thumbs and fingers. Facial alignment comparisons for subject B were difficult, due to his turned head. However, horizontal comparisons and partial vertical results provided ample consistency for corroboration. There were no citable inconsistencies between subject B and the 2 exemplars of Butch Cassidy. In the point-to-point comparison, important comparative measurements were again preempted by subject B's turned head, but the data that remained was conclusive. We see the median measurements again comparing with the known exemplars to well within the 5% tolerance pattern already established. Tellingly, the Fort Worth 5 exemplar compares better to subject B than to the Laramie Prison exemplar. The identifying marks comparisons here became central to the examination. On the left hand of subject B, Dr. Caldwell found evidence of raised veins, specifically forked relative to his knuckles, and positioned consistent with the apparent raised veins on the Fort Worth 5 photo. Plus, Dr. Caldwell positively identifies and traces the scar across subject B's left cheek. As with subject A's banged-up right hand, I can see plenty of additional features on subject B's face that validate a match. Over time, however, we felt that this particular illustration lacked perspective. So my sister revisited her studies and repronounced her demarcations, attached to a timeline. The unique scar, while not always obvious, is apparent and traceable in each stage of Parker's life. Here is the visible cognitive design that proves all our assertions. This is the smoking gun. So let me relive that aha moment with you. I've been alone with it for so long. I remember that when we first looked at Subject B's face up close, I noticed lots of nicks and scratches, things one would expect on an old cabinet card. But there was something else, faintly embedded in his skin, that was not mere surface damage. In the image, a shadowy line could be seen swerving across the cheek of Subject B. Even more apparent was a curly design alongside the nose of Subject B. This man had some sort of long facial blemish. It was very perplexing. We studied the anomaly for 10 or more minutes. Sabrina insisted on checking some different resolutions to be sure we were not seeing a digital aberration. Eventually, she agreed these lines were actually in the print, on the face of Subject B. I figured this detail would become our undoing, until we pulled a random version of the Laramie mugshot. A big surprise awaited us. Lo and behold, there on this very famous image, clear as day, was the same scar, waving across Cassidy's left cheek in just the same manner. And when we could discern some connecting scar tissue aside his nose, we realized that the Dow photo contained important new information. Now we had room to theorize about an injury that the Western world was largely unaware of. Immediately I thought of the cuts and scrapes I had seen upon curved skin, on people's faces. I knew that a hard, round edge could produce the type of rolling injury Parker was exhibiting. What was more, the subdermal nature of the scar indicated an injury that had been sustained years earlier and had since grown over. My sister and I quickly came to the same conclusion. Young Robert Parker had likely been kicked in the face by a horse, probably at a very early age. This made sense when you considered that the hardy lad was already doing a man's work on Patrick Ryan's Utah ranch at the age of only 13. Young Robert Parker certainly would have learned some hard lessons as a paid ranch hand at such an early age. Those experiences would have made or broken him as a cowboy. It seems clear that obstacles only deepened his resolve. Grown-over scars show up well in studio lighting, as light strikes at a sheer angle from the side or from above. The photo stand at Laramie Prison was certainly lit to reveal such facial nuance. But the officers there probably liked George Cassidy and did not make mention of his mark. Years later, the Pinkerton National Detective Agency examined the photo, then listed on their Cassidy circulars a small scar under left eye. Today, few experts are willing to discuss this unique scar, which is here, apparent and traceable, in 3 different photos of Butch Cassidy. This graphic sheds a piercing light upon the progression of the bandit's violent life and career. And with a youthful glimpse finally added to the lineup from the lens of an early photographic pioneer, we can appreciate the societal change surrounding Butch Cassidy and all the cowboy outlaws. This is Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, at age 22, just a couple months removed from the Sundance jail and about to ride into outlaw history, a history not properly understood until this discovery. Many think the Sundance Kid just appeared with the Wild Bunch around 1896, but in fact he was one of Robert Parker's early associates from southwest Colorado, joining his friend while the boys schemed inside Tom McCarty's cabin near Cortez. The timing and logistical implications of the new evidence leave us with little doubt. Harry Longabaugh was the mysterious fourth robber, and likely held the horses in front of the San Miguel Valley Bank on June 24, 1889. This is Robert Leroy Parker at age 23. He could still go straight at this juncture in his life, but his disdain for the greedy power brokers of the West is too great. He gazes at the tent door flap and listens to the movement of people and horses and wagons. He and the Kid will pose as mining investors in Telluride until they are joined by McCarty and Matt Warner. Then those four will ride into town dressed like spending cowboys and commandeer over $20,000 in cash and gold. While Dr. Caldwell and I were first going over these close-up images, I was mesmerized by this face and what I knew it represented to Western culture. This man once told rancher Harry Adsit that he would leave his mark in the world. Today, we still search for him, because he did just that. Butch Cassidy epitomized the classic cowboy outlaw, and his legacy is stronger than ever. However, it is clear that few Butch and Sundance enthusiasts have any idea who these men were. Many don't want to know who they were. They are satisfied with the outlaws they have imagined, and find it bothersome to have to rethink themselves. True West magazine recently put the mugshots of Cassidy and a ragged Nick Nolte together and jokingly labeled them twins. Institutions such as this have a simple cash cow to milk and want nothing outside of their brand. But the start of an Old West legend, previously noted for its ending, has finally been revealed. It is said that if you make people think they are thinking, they will love you. But if you make them actually think, they will hate you. Admittedly, I fall into the latter category. However, it was into my hands that fate intentionally landed this spectacular artifact. I was the one and only witness to recognize and gain a unique relationship with young Butch and Sundance. Realize that the people you may be turning to for your dose of historical gumption are professional storytellers, protecting their rackets. Sure, they will attack other authors, or they will keep new discoveries away from their memberships, or they will print silly photo spreads over real news. But the Dan Bucks, Stephen Aarons, and True Wests of the world are simply resigned to stale old stories. I am an historian, and I have just presented our new understanding of Butch and Sundance. It is time to update the plaque in Telluride to include both Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I officially challenge every person watching this video, everybody on Earth, to prove me wrong. You cannot do it, and you probably will not try, because you would soon find yourself confirming my conclusions, and actually working for me, unpaid. And let's face it, you would just hate that. Besides, anyone who cannot find the obvious scar on Cassidy's left cheek is either blind or dumb. I'll go a step further and say that anybody who sees the scar but will not admit to it is a coward. With their democracy now a Russian guinea pig, many Americans see the scar but say nothing. As for the Dow photo, it has been hiding in plain sight all along, hiding behind its subject's unexpected youth and cunning, hiding behind shifting photographic technology and conditions, hiding behind the sheer improbability of circumstances examined over a century after the fact. For more information on this amazing discovery, including Dr. Caldwell's official authentication, please enjoy Butch and Sundance, The New Evidence, available wherever fine ebooks are sold. My name is Brian Maida Bleeker. Thanks for watching Butch and Sundance, The New Authority.
I fly a starship across the universe divide, and when I reach the other side, I'll find a place to rest my spirit if I can. Perhaps I may become a highwayman again. Or I may simply be a single drop of rain, but I will remain. And I'll be back again and 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 a